Welcome to the Founder Experience, where we're charting the unpredictable waters of startup ventures. I'm Nathan Williams.
And I'm Alex Gutjahr.
Today, we're asking ChatGPT what the best tips for new entrepreneurs are, and we've heard that ChatGPT is not too bad with giving recommendations, but it ends up being about 80% accurate with most of what it says. So we want to discuss and see if we agree with what ChatGPT recommends. Is it a better startup coach than we are?
Okay, let's test this out. Let me ask ChatGPT. We're using ChatGPT 5 thinking mode. What are your 5 top tips for entrepreneurs just starting their first business? Okay, you ready?
Let's do
You
it.
don't see them, so I read them. Point number 1, define a narrow ICP, that's ideal client profile, and one painful problem. State the desired outcome in one sentence, ignore everything else. So, what do you think?
I wish I had followed that advice. This is super good advice if your goal is to start a business. You'll have a much shorter road to success. Knowing who you're selling to, exactly what you're trying to sell to them, why they want it, it's going to be a very much shorter path to getting a rolling business. I did not do this.
Me neither, but I agree, and this goes similar to what we discussed, right? Know who you are targeting, come up with a painful problem, state the desired outcome in one sentence, right? From the point of view of the client. I think that's solid advice. So that's very good.
Well, I do want to state the counterpoint. There's a reason why we didn't do that, right? And there's a reason why that a lot of entrepreneurs don't do that, even though it's probably the best advice that you can get. And one of the reasons is because oftentimes entrepreneurs going into maybe a novel field don't always know where it's going to end up. There are usually 2 types of entrepreneurs that start. One is starting in sort of a blue ocean type of environment where everything is possible. There's not a lot of competition, and this is the type of environment where you can create a disruptive business. So think of, Apple computers when it started in, the 70s. There weren't very many computer companies at the time. It's like personal computers were a brand new thing. You had to be sort of in the right place at the right time. And they were doing it for the love of the game. Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak were part of this computer club that were doing it because they loved it. And then there were a lot of sort of failed attempts at making a business, but then they ended up building Apple, which happened to be a success. And they did it because they loved it. They did it because they saw the possibilities. It is a much lower risk likelihood of us having a successful business come out of that approach because they didn't necessarily know where it was going to end up. And you often find that in entrepreneurial environments. But if you're starting with the intention of being an entrepreneur, it's almost like the opposite, right? You start, okay, I'm not in this for, because I love computers in general, and we'll see where we end up. Or, in my case, I'm not interested. It would be the opposite of going in and saying, I just know blockchain's the future. I don't know exactly how, but something blockchain, something supply chain, and let's put them together. And then I started, the business that way. It's the opposite. It's like, okay, someone has a pain point. Let's see what this is the customer I want to address. This is their pain, and this is how I'm going to address it. And being very clear, much shorter path to success.
Yeah, I agree, especially with these kind of frontier technologies. That this is the risk or the bet that you are taking. Okay, there's huge potential. I don't know exactly how it will play out, but there's no way it will be gone anytime soon. Right? Similar with AI. I think we're still very early. You still see many things just happening, right? Whether that's agents or then video, and I'm pretty interested to see how this is or how this will look like in 1 year from now, right? And it's many people are now betting big on AI, But I think the end game is not yet clear, or not yet defined there.
I
Um,
think that this is the big thing, right? Like, I just watched The Social Network again the other day because I like the movie, even though I know
mhm.
it's a big drama. I just like seeing Justin Timberlake pretending to be Sean Parker. But the with at the time, no one knew what Facebook was going to be, and they didn't monetize for quite a long time, right? Because they didn't want it to be not cool. They didn't know where it could end up. They didn't have an ideal customer profile or what their pain points were. Sort of,
Yeah.
maybe college students need to know what their relationship status is, I guess.
Yep.
But I mean, it was very, very ill defined. And same thing with AI. Like the people today who are starting AI companies that are being successful are doing this approach, this second approach of identifying a customer, ideal customer profile, what their pain points are, and then applying AI in order to solve it in a good way. But do you think that the guys at OpenAI started that way?
No, probably not. They started
No.
so early. I mean, that's one of the other aspects. OpenAI was started many, many years back, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
ChatGPT is now. I mean, it's now also been, what is it, 2 or 3 years already?
Yeah.
2 years. I mean, since ChatGPT is out, but OpenAI has existed for much, much longer, right? People just
Yeah.
weren't aware because it was running under the radar, doing all the research and training, etc. But that's also like they didn't start out as successful as they are now, right? This is also something to keep in mind.
So anyway, I think that that
Mm.
that basically this is excellent business advice that everybody should follow and that nobody I know follows because everyone I know is trying to go after a disruptive business.
Very good. Okay, on to the second point. Sell before you build. Pre-sell or get LOIs, like letters of intent. Aim for 5 to 10 paying customers with manual delivery first. There's a lot in there.
Oh gosh. Whew, what do you think?
So let me start at with the last sentence. Aim for 5 to 10 paying customers with manual delivery first. I like the manual delivery first, which is similar to doing things that don't scale initially. Right? I think one of the traps is early on to automate or scale as much as possible, and not doing the work that doesn't scale. Right? Writing handwritten letters to your first 100 customers, or just going out talking to your 10 first clients. Something like this. I think there's a hesitance to just doing this, um, and just thinking about, okay, how can we automate this or do it at scale, etc. I think there's still value in finding your first customers and with manual delivery, whatever that means for a specific business. So yeah, let's take one sentence at a time. So that's my point. How do you see that?
I think that this is wonderful advice if you can do this. Yeah, but this is not always possible.
Hmm.
It really isn't. If you go out and you want to start maybe a more general business, it's different than if you want to go and start a specific one. And oftentimes you have to think, what is my credibility with the customer? Right? If I go, for example, into, I love taking the medical field because it's so specialized, right? If I were to go out into the medical field and say, look, I'm building the latest software for medical payment system processing or something like
Hmm.
that, and I want to pre sell this to 4 or 5 companies, how am I going to do that? I'm not from the medical field. I don't know how this goes. Why would a customer trust me and prepay me to build them something as opposed to someone else? Um, Whereas if I have something, then they pay for what I have or what I've built. And it all comes down to what credibility you have. If I've worked for 50 years in the medical industry and I'm, now, 70 years old and I know everybody in the field and I know what problems they have, I could go and call my 5 closest friends who have $1 million budgets each and say, okay, guys, 50 grand each. I'm going to build the thing that's going to solve all your problems. And you can trust me because you know me, right? And you know my career, and you know my history, and I know you and I know your pain points. So it all comes down to credibility. Like this is great if you can do it. But I mean, early on in my wife's business, right? She had the idea of maybe doing a Kickstarter. and pre-selling this toy to customers that she was building. And the problem was she's a first-time entrepreneur. Who's going to pre-buy a toy with sort of just an idea on the table? And we didn't have a previous business that she could say, okay, we talk to your old customer base and get them to support it. So it sounds like a good idea until you realize the logistics of it, of building that trust with customers. It can be a huge mountain to overcome, and it might not be possible.
That is true, though, especially with the Kickstarter example. I've just been thinking. I invested or funded a few campaigns where where I mostly was sold on how it was presented in the marketing, whether there were videos, etc. And to be honest, not so much about who's the person behind and how much do I trust them. So I think, and especially for hardware businesses, or where you need upfront cash to even getting started, right? Not software as we discussed, which you can have AI prototype within a few minutes, but really something that needs upfront cash to build the initial batch of whatever it is. Um, I'm not. I agree when it comes to trust. That's important. But then again, I think it's also how well you can market or present the idea to someone so that they say, okay, this is I need or want this. So I,
I'm
I'm
also
I'm
going to
not
push
sure.
back on that a little bit, Alex, because
Good.
one of the I mean, I know that you've got good anecdotal evidence there. However, the reason that you saw those campaigns in the first place was because there were already backers. Usually, a Kickstarter campaign doesn't even get shown widely to people unless you have a really good initial traction with people signing up, and that usually means bringing your family, your friends, people that you
Yeah.
already have in your networks. And so, usually, you need at least something kick-started already in order to get there. And that's the challenge. And I'm not saying that you can't do it. In fact, it is absolutely great advice from ChatGPT here. I'm just saying that it's not always possible if
Yeah.
you're, especially if you're first time. The question
Yeah.
is, what resources do you have, right?
I agree. Should we move on to
Yeah,
the
let's do it.
third advice? Okay. Pick one distribution channel and dominate it. Set a weekly cadence for outreach content, outreach or content. Track leads, calls, wins. So before we continue with this one, I have to say I configured ChatGPT the personalization to robot. Right. Otherwise, it would have had already said, "What a good idea, great question, whatnot," and I would have 20 emojis. But I set it to personalization mode, like robot, and be very specific and on point, and don't like no emojis, no fluff, etc. So if it sounds a little bit harsh, that's on purpose. I just want to say that.
But I mean, this one is actually really good advice, and it's also really hard to follow if you're not sure what channels are going to be the best, right? But this one is a little bit easier to be disciplined about, right? If you're not sure,
True.
for example, if you want to go wholesale, if you want to go retail, if you want to go online or in person or whatever, it's often best to just make your best guess as to what's going to resonate with your
Yep.
ICP, and then just go for that one, and then change it later if it doesn't work.
And you have to test that. You
Yeah.
especially with novel technologies, you don't know what distribution channel works and what doesn't, right? And so I'd say yes, that's fine, but you have to test before. Come up with a few assumptions and then run tests on whether that's social, newsletter, personal outreach, whatever it is, and then measure the performance, and then yes, double down on what works, right? And then just go all in there. So that's that part. And the other one is also important. I was really bad doing this. Set a weekly cadence for outreach, track leads, calls, wins. So I guess this is similar to setting up a CRM, something like that, which I would also recommend today when you're starting out. You don't want to do this in Excel or avoid it at all. I think it's super important to have a system and a process to track leads, follow up, etc. So I definitely subscribe
Even
to
in
that
the early
idea.
days. So if
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
starting a new business in the early days, what
Yeah,
CRM would you recommend?
Pipe Drive.
What CRM would you use if you were like in the early days and didn't,
Yeah, Pipedrive is one. I wouldn't go with
Pipedrive?
HubSpot. I think it's heavily expensive. I've seen company paying multiple 10,000 euros per year for a subscription, which think is insane. You can get free CRMs these days, but I always loved Pipedrive, which is a small. I'm not sure, it was a 20 euro subscription, and then just having that visualized and being very disciplined about following up. Because we touch upon this as well. There is some romantic idea that you just build something and people will realize it's the best thing that has ever existed, and everything else feels like a failure. And but reality is people are just often busy, or they forget about you because you just an email that's just going to the bottom as new emails come in. Everyone's busy. So I think it's important to follow up and do this regularly. And it's not just one follow up, but especially when you're starting out, right? You don't convert as many leads as you would want to. So you have to reach out to so many more people to get to the ones that become clients, that I think it's important to be very structured when it comes to this. And a CRM helps with that. And again, it
Mm.
doesn't have to be the enterprise solution there. And if you can manage this otherwise, fine. But I think it's important to have some sort of system in place to do this, especially if you're not the only one doing it.
I, I like that. So this is generally good advice. I guess the only question I would ask about this particular advice that ChatGPT gives is if you have to test which sales channels are going to work before deciding on one and dominating. Where's
Uh-huh.
that line of I'm testing multiple sales channels and then I'm picking one versus I'm going after all these sales channels and I'm defocusing.
I wouldn't. Well, usually there are some constraints, right? Because testing these channels might involve paying a lot of money, especially if that's Google Ads. That's something that I would think about, or running ads on social. Um, and just it depends on how you want to test this. But we've done this as well for our companies. You usually get very clear signals, or at least the company, I may be biased because I just have the data set of the companies I work with, but there are channels that work exceptionally well where I say, okay, this is the channel. And then there are others which just don't give you the return that you would expect, right?
Mm,
So one is video content, high return I'd say for when you have a product that needs a little bit of education. I'd say video content is the best. If you One of the other businesses that was targeting was B2C, blockchain, incentivized gaming, Google Ads, because if you it depends then on how you distribute those ads and where. But that was the best channel. So yeah, what the specific test looks like per channel is probably unique to each company. But I'd say just come up with an assumption of the channels that are available and test them and then see, okay, which gives you the highest leverage. And then I'm not sure about the dominating part, but definitely double down on what works.
that makes sense. All right. So we agree. Good advice.
Good.
Next one.
Next, point 4. Guard cash like oxygen. Keep
Oh, God,
fixed
yes.
costs tiny. Hang on. Keep fixed costs tiny. Charge upfront. Avoid discounts. And skip hiring and equity until revenue is repeatable.
Yep.
Oof. Okay. Yep.
Cash
Okay.
is profitable businesses have gone under for lack of cash. And the
Yes.
cash flow is the hardest part. If you could have $1 million in orders, but if they're all paying you within the next 6 months, and you've got payments that you have to make today, your business is going to go under, right? It's a
Yes.
profitable business, but it's illiquid, and it's not going to work. And I loved this advice on avoiding discounts. I want to talk about that just very briefly. I hate giving discounts, and the best way, if you need to incentivize someone, is it's so much better to give some sort of bonus as opposed to
Mhm.
giving a discount. So if you're charging, say, let's say you've got an enterprise product and charging $10,000 a year for it. And they say, well, I want a discount. You can give them for 9,000, sure. Or you could give them 2 months free. And then you still get your 10,000, right? You still get your cash. Or you could,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of other things. You could give them extra features. You could give them, be creative, like maybe you give them a shout out on your page if they do it, or maybe you do a press release together. And then this is always possible, and a way to be creative is that people want discounts, but it's so much better if you can just get the cash and give them other bonuses. Like if you're doing a physical product, giving a discount of 10% means that you've got 10% less money. But if you give a second piece of product or something like that, then you're not out the price of the product you give, you're out the cost of the product you give, right? Which is less. So I always prefer giving bonuses as opposed to giving discounts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So that's for the discounts, but then there's keep fixed costs tiny, which I think is, but or what I would add here is be mindful about your own time and what it costs, right? Because one way of interpreting this is to say, okay, we don't have any subscriptions for software that could also could be self-hosted, and then we have someone run it, right? Either the founder or someone from the team, which also is a cost, right, in terms of time and stress. So I would like my first thought was, okay, keep fixed cost tiny, just don't have any subscriptions, because I think that's what is weighing quite heavily on especially new businesses, right? There's a subscription for Slack, for email, calendar, whatever, and that can become quite a big number if you just stack all these costs. So I think it makes sense to be mindful about them, but not to underestimate the alternative, right? So especially with the tech background, could say, okay, I run this software myself because it has an open source component, whatever. But then that, of course, requires still costs to operate it and time. And I think here that's important. We discussed this in another episode, to just be mindful about your own time and the value of that time, and then just weigh the costs. And not to just say, okay, I'm being very frugal here and not spend anything. Um, that's
Yeah,
what I would
I mean
say.
it's tough because your time is not as cash relevant as cash, right?
Yeah,
So if you
true.
spend say $500, €500 upfront to get someone to build something, they might do it a lot faster than you. But if
Yeah,
you do it slower and it takes more time, it's not as cash relevant because you were going to pay yourself anyway. So you already had sort of that cash plan, whereas this is an extra cash cost. Over time, you can imagine that your own time, if you're calculating it and doing a weigh in, that it'll cost you more to do your own time, but that difference in cost is basically a finance cost, right? Like it's the cost to not
yeah,
have to use up cash.
yeah. And on the final point, skip hiring and equity until revenue is repeatable. Would you agree to that?
I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes to be honest, it depends on your business. This is the one where I would say it depends on your business
Yeah.
because, um, yeah, I would skip hiring until you need to like get as far as you can before hiring, because hiring is a very big fixed cost. It will
Hmm.
introduce a big cost that is unavoidable into your company. Equity, on the other hand, is often for certain types of businesses the only way to get the talent you need, right? if you're starting if you're starting a business that is planning on being a scalable digital startup that's going to take VC money, you're not going to do it as a solo founder. Probably you're probably going to need a tech person, a money person, and a marketing person. Is
Hmm.
the triumvirate, right? And in order to get them on, you need to give them equity, right? No one's going to
Yeah.
do it for free, unless you're independently wealthy and have cash. But uh, that's just what it is. That's why companies have co-founders.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think as a general direction, this is still fine. But even for hiring, I'm just trying to think of an example where you need to bring in talent to offer a service or more value, right? So you wouldn't, or let me put it the other way around. You don't want to artificially restrict your growth just for the sake of cash, right? If hiring like or bring someone else could unlock you for the next stage, even if it comes at a cost, of course. So I'm not sure I would take that as face value, but really just consider the circumstances. Um,
all in all, however, I think that our prediction at the beginning of this discussion was correct, that ChatGPT gives advice that is about 80% correct, and that we've agreed
oh
with
yeah,
about 80% of the time.
let's
So,
that's true. Let's
that's not
let's let's
bad.
get
That's
to the
not bad for a business coach. You just
no,
can't
it's not.
call
Let's
it 100%.
exactly. Let's go to the last point. It says run a tight operating system, weekly goals, a simple dashboard, revenue churn, etc. 5 user conversations and one shippable improvement every week. So that
Oh, I
seems to be a
like
little
that.
bit biased, I think.
But I do
To
like that,
depending on
though. Introducing metrics early on, so many entrepreneurs, myself included, I've never been able to do that. And it's
yeah,
hard to keep on track and it slows you down.
yes.
Introducing metrics early on and saying, okay, I've got these goals, I'm going to do this many conversations with users, this many improvements, this blah, 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 blah. But at least you might not be able to track the end goal, but you can track the journey that you've made. You can track the progress you've made and whether you've kept up with it. And you will get a lot further than if it's sort of left loosey goosey.
And I think it confronts you with the reality, right? I think especially early on, if you're in builder mode or just working on what you think your dream business is, it's easy to just discard like the harsh reality that you didn't speak to any clients, you didn't have any revenue, etc. So just tracking these numbers, like it's so silly, but what you know that saying as well, right? What gets measured gets managed. What gets tracked? I'm butchering
Yeah,
it,
you
but
can't manage what you don't measure.
yes, that way. So I think that's important to have that early on and be very um, or be aware of where you're heading with the business. I think that's important. 5 user conversations and one shippable. Okay, shippable improvement fair, but 5 user conversations. That seems very specific. I think the
Yeah, it
general
might
idea
really
here
depend
is
on the
yeah,
type of business.
but yeah, but I mean, still, the general idea to talk to your clients if you can, one shippable improvement every week. Also depends on is that for a client product, something for you internally. Also, I like the idea, but I find it a little bit fuzzy. I think that the takeaway for me here is weekly goals and the dashboard to just track the numbers, like any KPIs that are relevant for you,
And making
like
it
internally or
concrete.
externally. Yeah, so that I definitely see. So yeah, solid advice from the AI here.
Yeah, very good. Well, I don't think that you and I are out of a job yet, but the AI is getting better.
Yeah, well, we will revisit that every 6 to 12 months and then benchmark how good it actually is at this point. That's it for this episode of The Founder Experience. If you enjoyed it, do us a favor, hit subscribe wherever you are listening, whether that's Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. If you've got a second, leave a rating or a review, it really helps. And you can find more episodes and behind the scenes stuff on our website, founderexperience.fm. And if you've got feedback or business ideas that you want us to talk about, shoot us a message at hello@founderexperience.fm. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you next time.